Hello, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Uh, just for representing from me some very, very interesting and I hope useful for tout le monde text. Then I begin. Satanists have failed breaks. We must be prepared for the fact that anything can happen in any moment. When lawlessness is actually legalized, we must be ready for any scenario, and even for what seems to be impossible in principle now. In the Soviet film Children's World of Mr. Basov is a film about the anti-human nature of fascism. According to the plot of the film, a group of imperial inspectors, accompanied by assessment, in a routine manner discuss the goals of objectives of the command of the concentration camp for children. Children are used for medical experiments and for obtaining blood for wounded German soldiers. Subsequently exhausted and tortured, children are sent to the gas chambers. One woman from the SS inspectors offers the kids sweets, but they refuse to take them until one kid took the candy and put it in his mouth, lay down on the floor, and after him taking the candy, the rest of the children lay down. The female inspector is surprised to ask the camp staff, "What is going on?" She's answered, "The children think that they were given poison." And this is important because a vaccine for children is being prepared today in the form of like a yogurt as well, or a spray, nose spray. Fascists today, as well as then, act openly. Charlatans and swindlers plan hysteria and genocide, and eugenic is passed off as genetic science, and a pseudo-vaccine, a la Mengele, is offered to everyone without exception, even to pregnant women. In Nazi Germany, such an offensive of evil took place in small steps, gradually becoming reality and the law. A person today is turned into an experimental object over which it is permissible to experiment as you like. What awaits us all, what tasks and goals, mechanism exist for the genocidal farmer, undead and her prostitutes. There, post-capitalist Satanists' strength lies in our mass ignorance, indifference and thoughtless submission. By the early 2000s, a system was created in which WHO, Health Organization, became an instrument for creating a global health bureau, namely the Bureau of the Health Care System, created according to the patterns of profit at any cost for large pharmaceutical companies using former specialists of Nazi Germany and or the pharmaceutical companies themselves who were in the structures of the Third Reich. Moreover, the owners of pharmaceutical companies are large banking structures, and their collaborators from the so-called higher spheres of society, closely related to criminal mafia structures, drug and human traffic, economic and political murderers, and others. These banking structures are leading humanity to the new world order, about which reported openly and deftly in the official media. Namely, first, a single, so to speak, scientific theory and practice, excluding opposition. 2. A single treatment protocol for all, single medical technologies, a single set of medicines. And further, this is not only a business project, but an ideological, strategic, and tactical plan for the great zeroing of all the previous aspects of the life of mankind and of mankind himself. The great convergence project has its origins at Harvard, namely the digital and biotechnical essence combined into one whole, and the transformation of a man into biorobot in a sense. This is the ultimate goal of the transhumanist idea. The general vaccination with a certain experimental substance of the population of the planet is aimed at creating absolute recipients of the great convergence. The external technique and tools to achieve this goal are the pharmaceutical companies that play a leading role in the global genocide restructuring, provide powerful financial infusion and polytechnic influence through multi-alliances and collaborators. The main interest in the profit of the vaccine, which is provided by government orders from the pocket of the taxpayer, who was punctured many times and under the pretext of the endless concern for his health and under the same pretext of big snot. The benefactors, so-called, voluntarily forced the poor fellow to pull the muzzle over his face and put him on a short chain with a interchangeable, non-violently violent self-masturbation. God knows what anyway in both nostrils, like PCR test, not particularly stemming with the rationale of such ritual action. In contrast to those ineffective in the sense of profits from the old cheap and new expensive drugs, not just a one-day vaccine, but a universal reusable vaccine against an endlessly mutating virus, more abruptly than Klondike. And the third component is voluntarily compulsory and universal trend of this vaccination. But there are two obstacles. Not everyone wants to be vaccinated, and vaccination is not obligatory everywhere. The second pain is, as we already know, the vaccine for a particular disease has a final income. And in this regard, the flu turns out to be ideal. The main thing is that the flu is constant. Pandemic and therefore gives rise to use of emergency measures, techniques of coercion and manipulation, intimidation. When a person is more afraid of it getting infected than dying from experimental vaccine. At the same time, the cause of illness and death is falsified, and the symptoms of the newfangled big snot have a tendency to roll with the symptoms and currents, all known and even still unknown of mankind, ailments and ailments. In fact, from the end of the 19th, Big Pharma began preparing big pandemia. It is very significant that in 1990, the WHO releases the first documents in its history which speak of the forthcoming flu pandemic. Looking ahead, let's remember the World Bank's issue of pandemic bonds. According to the World Bank, the outbreak should last at least 12 weeks and have more than 2,500 deaths. When all these conditions are met, it results in payments to individual countries in need of disaster containment assistance, and investor loss some or all of the money. On March 24, the 12 weeks milestone will be overcome. According to the latest WHO data, there are at least more than 200,000 infections and 8,000 deaths in the world. In other words, pandemic bonds are catastrophic tide debt designed to raise money from issuers in the event of natural disasters, and in Russian Vax slang, to treat a sucker. Influenza Pandemic Preparedness Plan. The role of WHO and guidance for national regional planning. The plan is co-sponsored by the European Influenza Scientific Working Group and WHO and a host of research institutes affiliated with WHO. 2002. WHO headquarters in Geneva. Meeting of experts on influenza with the presence of representatives of the pharmaceutical companies Roche and Aventis Pasteur, which provide guidance on the use of vaccine and antiviral drugs during the influenza pandemic, before avian influenza in 2004. For preparedness for an influenza pandemic and at least some charity, WHO has provided information on the definition of a pandemic. An influenza pandemic occurs when a new influenza virus appears against which mankind does not have initial immunity, which leads to several simultaneous epidemics around the world with a huge number of deaths and cases. This situation is fueled by growing passenger traffic, urbanization and overpopulation. In the same years, the total quarantine program in 2005 was developed by Rothschild and Hatchet. The experience of quarantine at military bases with the falling of these two scoundrels is transferred to the entire civilian population. And it is no coincidence that in 1997 and 2001, a certain Mr. Rumsfeld headed the American biotechnology company cheap license with the research of the drug Tamiflu, which was bought by the Roche farm in 1996. After becoming minister, Mr. Rumsfeld retained a stake in this company. Thus, the Bush administration used the idea of general isolation for political and military purpose. Then, 2005.